guys, welcome to day 13 of Kreate. It's so good to have you. It's so good to have you. Amazing. If you're in here, just share the link. Share the link with someone that you know needs this. Today we're going to have a very practical and a very powerful session. And I think, especially if you were there for part 1, you would want to attend part 2. This is scripting part 2. A few days ago, we did scripting part 1. Not a few days ago, still a few days ago. We did scripting part 1. And you definitely want to be a part of, you definitely want to share this to everybody. I think we're about 20 that watched scripting part 1. So share it with them, share it with them, share it with them. Share! Let me know if you can hear me. Let me know if it's loud and clear. Let me know if it's loud and clear. Loud and clear. Let me hear myself on this side. Share. Let me know if you can hear me. It's pretty clear actually. Cool. Alright, let's get right into it. Thank you. Let's get right into it. Okay. I'm just going to first start off by doing a recap of scripting part 1. I remember when we learned about the ABCs of scripting, we learned about the 3-in-3 structure. And here's the thing. For any great video, you need to have a good script. The main driver of a great video is a good script. Now, at different, we know creators come in different shapes, sizes, colors, very diverse group of people. But one thing that unites most creators is the framework through which we plan. Now, we're going to have in total 3 sessions on scripting. The first one we already had, and we did the 3-3 framework, right? And just to remind you, this scripting method is generally useful for educational or essay styled videos. Do you understand? So videos where you are explaining a topic, making an argument, or teaching. And the idea is simple. Let me even share my screen and do a little bit of drawing. So the idea is simple. Let me open a new tab, new page. All right. The idea is you have, your intro, you have your body, and then you have your. Do you understand? So this is just a simple 3-in-3 framework, right? And what makes it 3-in-3 is that your intro, we talked about the importance of intro, and if you have videos on hooks, you know how to craft an intro. Starting, a sentence that hooks the viewer in, and then you lead on to, a sentence that gives the viewer more, a clear picture of, the context that they need to have, and then the third statement now leads them into the video. So you have a hook, you have context, and then you have leading. And now this is your body. I would assume that since we're talking about an educational essay kind of video, you would have points, right? So for example, let's say our video is about how I'm starting the year as a creator. That's the title of our video. So your body will now be your points, right? For example, in that video we had some points. For example, we had vision, we had structures, and then we had action. And for the outro, you still have 3 parts. You have recap, you have conclusion, and then you have call to action. Can you see why it's a 3 in 3 model? So you can still break it down into further 3s, right? In vision, you can have 3 points. How I set my vision, what I think about vision, or what vision is. Do you understand? What vision is. You can have blah 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 blah. Structures, 3 points. The 3 structures I set. Action, 3 points about action. 3 in 3 model. So we have like a tree structure. Do you understand? And this was what we learned in part 1. Now, part 1, let me just tell you. Part 1 is for what? Essay / explainer / argument. Part 2 is for narrative, story, and then part 3 is for, I'll call it marketing videos. So if you didn't watch part 1, go and watch it again. I just drew a recap of everything we did in part 1, and today we're going to do part 2. I hope we are able to finish part 2 today because it's very huge, right? So today we're doing narrative story. Now let me switch the camera for a second. What is a narrative story? We have to start by understanding what a narrative story is, right? When I talk about a narrative story, I'm talking about a story that has a beginning, middle, and end, and the character changes throughout the story. Do you understand? So we're talking about movies are examples of narrative stories, right? When we talk about storybooks, there are some storybooks you read that are just explainers, right? There are people talking about, okay, how to make 3 million naira. Do you understand? That can be an example of an explainer. But when we talk about narrative story, it can be an autobiography. It can be, how I got to how I bought my new phone, right? That's a story. You understand? So today we're going to talk about narrative stories, and it's a very important and very beautiful structure called the Harmon story cycle. Do you understand? So just to recap what I just said, today, if you're a creator that deals with fictional stories, not only fictional stories but even real life stories that have a narrative structure, this structure is for you. It's called the Harmon story cycle. And in case you didn't notice, you can see I have my notebook here. You can't have this session without a notebook. So please, if you don't have a notebook here, grab a notebook and let's get ready to learn, right? It's going to be a practical session, and after this session, I'm going to give assignments. Last time I gave assignments, I did not see any feedback. So if you're not in Kreate community, join and submit your assignments. And in later episodes, we're going to review some of the assignments that are turned in, and we're going to break them down so that we can learn better. Do you understand? So let's get into it. Grab your notebooks and let's get into it. Harmon story cycle. Whoosh. So the Harmon story cycle is a story structure that is popularly used in films. It's popularly used in movies and storybooks. And it is just a way that writers ensure that they keep their story interesting. This is, the Harmon story cycle is actually, born out of deep research and deep understanding of general stories. There are many stories, there are many films and stories that you have watched today that actually take their roots in the Harmon story. And after today's class, you're going to realize how much of what you watch actually follows this structure. But let's get into it. Now, it's important to know that the Harmon story cycle has 8 parts. So whatever story you're writing is divided into 8 parts. And we're going to go through the parts one by one as carefully and as slowly as possible so that you understand. Okay, let me record my screen so that I can have content. Thank you. All right. So the Dan Harmon story cycle, I'll just go through all the 8 points and then I'll explain again. Number 1 point, a character is in a zone of comfort. Number 2, they want something. Number 3, they enter an unfamiliar situation. Number 4, they adapt to it. Number 5, they get what they want. Number 6, they pay a heavy price. They return to their familiar situation, having changed, right? So let's go through it one by one and understand what each of them means. So I'm going to take an example. We're going to take an example from Spider-Man. How many people have watched Amazing Spider-Man 2? Amazing Spidey 2. Amazing Spidey 2 is the one that had Electro, is the one that had is the one that had Electro, right? The one that he fought Electro. I think many of us have watched it. He fought Electro. And we're going to follow the story of Amazing Spider-Man explaining the Dan Harmon story cycle. Remember, there are 8 points. And what these 8 points are the plot points. They are the major points in the story. Major points in the story. So it's like having bullet points, knowing where you want your story to go. The major points in the story. I think there's a chart. Dan Harmon story. Oh yeah, Dan Harmon story. So grab your notebook. So yes, number 1, the character is in a zone of comfort, right? If you remember in Spider-Man started, his life was normal, right? He was a college student, he was a superhero, and he had this bubbling relationship with Gwen Stacy. Who can remember? Was it Gwen Stacy? Yes, Gwen Stacy. He had this interesting relationship with Gwen. Do you understand? So he was in his zone of comfort. Now, in the next plot point, you show that the character wants something. What really starts the story. So the character is in a zone of comfort. Remain in a zone of comfort. The character wants something. So in this case, Peter wants to be with Gwen and fears for her safety. He also seeks answers about his parents, right? If you remember, his parents, they had disappeared, and he wanted to know what led to his parents' disappearance. Do you understand? So the only Spider-Man you haven't watched. Wow. Sorry about that. So in the next plot point, they enter an unfamiliar situation. So this is the call to adventure. Do you understand? There's no story without conflict. Do you understand? So you start by setting the stage. The character is in a zone of comfort. Then the character has an internal desire. The internal desire is what leads the direction of the story. Do you understand? That internal desire. Then in the midst of the internal desire, they enter an unfamiliar situation. And in this case, that was the birth of the villain, Electro and Green Goblin. And I remember how Electro came about. I remember how, he just made a big show. That was an unfamiliar situation. So what happens in an unfamiliar situation is that it puts you into chaos. You enter into a disconvoluted state. Do you understand? That's the 3rd plot point. Don't worry, just keep learning. As we approach the end, we are going to learn how to create your own stories using this framework. Then number 4, they adapt to it. So when that's, usually in a superhero movie, for example, there's a big outburst, there's a villain that attacks, right? And they finally, they manage to find a way to adapt to the situation. They, maybe fight back, go to meet a mentor, get some certain powers, but they adapt to it. Now they adapt to it is usually the longest part of the story. Usually where the meat of the story is, the adaptation to the, to the chaos. So Peter struggles to balance his responsibilities as Spider-Man and his relationship with Gwen while uncovering the truth about his parents. That was the major part of the story, right? Then the 5th plot point, the character gets what they want. The fifth plot point, the character gets what they want. So that means if it's a villain they're fighting, they finally win the villain. Or if it's, like in the case of Batman, Dark Knight Rises. Was it Batman Dark Knight Rises? Where he finally got, someone to take his place and he could step down as Batman because he wanted to be with Rachel. Do you understand? These are examples. So they finally get what they want. But they pay a heavy price for it, and that's the fifth plot point. Sorry, the sixth plot point. The sixth plot point. Fifth plot point is that they get what they want. The sixth plot point is that they pay a heavy price for it. With great power comes great responsibility. And then, in this case, who got the heavy price that Spider-Man paid in Amazing Spider-Man 2? Even though he did Electro, he lost Gwen Stacy. And I remember that iconic scene where she was falling down from the building and Spidey extended his webs, but he couldn't catch her. Do you understand? So you pay a heavy price for it. Then they return back to their familiar situation. It becomes life as usual, but they have changed. So there's an internal change. And in this case, Spider-Man returned back to his family, switched from being a Spider-Man to Mon, but he eventually continues his role as a superhero. But having changed, there's no story, there's no good story without change. The aim of a story is that your character changes. Whatever, your character grows in the process. Do you understand? So at the end of a superhero movie, your character would have grown. Your character would have changed. Gwen died. But now is not a political position that you can step down. Go and watch Dark Knight Rises. He wanted a replacement because he wanted to stop being Batman. He wanted to just be what do you call it? That guy, Bruce Wayne, right? And if it was just Bruce Wayne, Rachel did not want to entangle with him because if it was just Batman. So now let's bring it all into context. We started by saying Dan Harmon's story circle contains 8 plot points. The character is in a zone of comfort. Right after this, we're going to create our own story with these plot points. The character is in a zone of comfort, so you establish the world. You establish, the character's normal situation. Then the character wants something. There's an internal desire. There's something that makes them long for something, right? In your case, in your story, just be thinking of that context. And then they enter an unfamiliar situation. That's the point where there's something that shakes them. There's something that they didn't expect. Maybe it's a new villain that is in town, or maybe there's an explosion, or maybe there's something, right? So we're using superhero movie concept, and then they adapt to it. I told you that this is the meat of the story. All those times that the character is, this type part is usually characterized by they make progress, then they encounter obstacle, then they grow past the obstacle, they encounter another obstacle, right? No matter, you can just make it a loop, right? So I want to let's just bring an example of this. Let's flesh this out a bit. In Kung Fu Panda, that's a very good example. Can you remember that scene where, no, let's not use Kung Fu Panda. Let's use a very micro scene in Kung Fu Panda, right? When Po wanted to get a cookie from Master Shifu. So this is a cookie, and this is Po. This Po's tummy, this Po's head. This is Po. Po wants to get cookie. That's his goal, right? That's what he wants. He enters an unfamiliar situation where he enters that room that he sees Monkey guarding the cookie. Monkey hiding the cookie, right? Then Monkey leaves the room and then he gets the cookie, right? So he has made progress. But what happens? Shifu brings another cookie. And he has to keep fighting and growing as a superhero to be able to get that cookie from Shifu. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. So that point that the character is adapting to the story, they encounter a problem, grow past it, encounter another problem, grow past it, encounter another problem, grow past it. That's the the flesh of the story. That's character adapts to it, and then the character gets what they want. So they finally get what they want. Po finally gets the cookie. He finally becomes the dragon warrior, but he pays a heavy price for it. Tai Long comes back. Tai Long, and destroys the whole. He starts to destroy the whole land. Do you understand? And then they have to return back to their familiar situation, but they are changed. So in this Kung Fu Panda example, we're not Kung Fu Panda doesn't exactly follow that structure. Actually, I just realized. But yes, if you understand, let me know in the chat. No good story without change. If I don't get my change, there will be a big story. All right. So if you understand, let me know so we can move on to creating our own example, our own story. Create 30 story. Let me know if you understand so we can move on to creating our Create 30 story. Alright, so I'm just going to start with the Create 30 story. Alright, now let us say my story is about how I got a new phone to create content. How I got a new phone to create content. Right? That's the story I want to tell. And I want to use 8 plot points. So, my character is in a familiar situation, right? Character is in a zone of comfort. My comfort zone is that I'm just a regular boy, I'm just a small time boy creating content, right? I'm Isaac and I've been creating content for the past 3 years. And I've created for the past 3 years. I'm making it a very simple story that we can relate to so that everybody can apply it. I'm Isaac and I've been creating for the past 3 years, right? So that's my zone of comfort. Now, number 2, I want something. I realized that my videos lacked something. They were not as cinematic as I wanted them to be. I realized my videos weren't as cinematic. Why am I writing with red? Let me switch to black, sorry, so that you can see very well. So you should be able to see this. As I wanted them to be. So where are we? Character wants something. Now, what's plot point 3? Character encounters an unfamiliar situation. In this case, my unfamiliar situation, my unfamiliar situation is that one day I received a comment. I received a comment dissing or insulting or trolling my video quality. He says that maybe the comment said that how can you be teaching us how to create when your videos look like what's an insult? Give me an insult. I don't know plenty insults like that. Until he was beaten by radioactive spider, radioactive JJ. Alright, so yeah, as I was saying, I received an insult online, right? I received a troll on my video quality. That's an unfamiliar situation, right? Now I am perplexed. What is plot point 3? I adapt. My adaptation points, I can build on it. I can say I focused on my scripting. My scripting. Oh no no no. Let me not go that way. Let me make it a bit fictional. Alright. I was determined to get the money to buy a new phone. Determined to buy a new phone by all costs. So I started. What are crazy things people can do to buy a new phone? What are crazy things people can do to buy a new phone? I'm thinking. So I started. I was not selling drugs, obviously. Okay. I worked. So I work at this company where I'm paid per video I make. I work at this company where I'm paid per video I make. So remember I told you that the adapt is usually the most fleshy part of the script, right? So that's why we're taking our time here. And also, usually this context like this can be introduced at number 1, right? Where I work or the kind of job I do. Do you understand? So I don't necessarily need to be making, I don't necessarily need to be bringing more context at this point. So I can now bring some more plot points per video I make. So I start turning out plenty videos, but without focusing. I started turning out many videos, but with bad quality. Then my boss grudgingly paid the money for the videos. Oh, should we have 1 more minute? So I've just built a whole scenario here where this guy starts, trying all he can just to make money so that he can what? Buy the phone because of the trolls in that unfamiliar situation. So now we can jump to the point in number 5 where he gets what he wants. I finally can afford what will you call the phone? iPhone 13 Pro Max new. Let me draw the Apple logo. Yeah. Then 6, I get fired. Now, why is 6 I get fired? Because, okay, let's go back to the number 5. It says get what they want, right? Character gets what they want. Then number 6, they pay a heavy price for it. So usually when you get what you want, it comes at a cost. And sometimes this cost is not always negative, depending on how you got what you wanted. Sometimes many times, even though what you wanted is genuine, it still comes at a cost. Like, remember in the story of Amazing Spider-Man, he eventually loses Gwen, even though he was having, where is it? Gwen dies. Even though his intention was very good, do you understand? And hey, I've written so big. Number 6, so I lose my job. Number 7, I go back to, so number 7 is usually more philosophical and ideological, in the sense that he doesn't have to physically go back to the place, the film started, but you can actually go back to the place the story started. But I get back to an unfamiliar, I get back to my familiar situation. Then I get back to creating. Having changed. So because I lost my job, I now understand the importance of creating positive value. Or creating quality. So yeah, that's my cute little story about how I got my phone. And the point is that every good story, what's going on with my touch screen? Every good story, the character must change. In this story, I went through a whole arc and I changed. And we're doing it on the fly, but obviously when you sit down and you do it, you'll be able to make better sense of the 6 of the Dan Harmon story circle. Just a quick tip: this story, as much as it can be used for fiction, it can also be used for real life story. If you want to share stories on the internet, share interesting things, interesting events that happen to you on the internet. Whoosh. Can you still hear me? What happened? Yeah. So if you want to share stories about yourself on the internet, or things that happen to you, you can just think about the story and think about this story arc. Just put the 8 points together and see, how can my story fit within this framework? It must not be exactly the same thing. Many times it will not be exactly the same thing, but it just gives you an idea. Do you understand? So I hope you learned something. No, the phone was fufu in the box. You guys are funny in this chat. But yeah. So you have an assignment now. Your assignment, everybody, if you're not in Kreate community, join now. The link is pinned in the description. If you're not in Kreate community, join now, and you're going to submit your assignment between today and tomorrow. Tomorrow is the deadline, and your assignment is as follows. You're going to use the Dan Harmon story circle to write a story of your own. I just need to see the plot points, right? You don't need to flesh out the whole story. I just need to see the plot points. Do you understand? It can be a real life story, it can be a fictional story, but I want you to plot the plot points. Do you understand? Is that clear? Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for staying a bit over time with me. I'm so sorry. And I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.
How was today's session? I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comment section. Now, to ensure that you put everything you learned into practice, we are building a community of creators just like me and you that come together to keep each other accountable, to share ideas, and to grow together. The name of this community is called Kreate Community. To be a part of this community is simple and it's free. All you have to do is click the link pinned in the live chat or the link in the description. Thank you so much and see you tomorrow. Bye.